Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, March 10th meeting of the Phoenixville Borough Council. We'll start our meeting with a moment of silence followed by the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Crack, roll call, please.
Mr. Bowers. Present. Mr. Dalton. Present. Ms. Dugan. Here. Mr. Ichter. Present. Mr. Kuznar. Present. Ms. Mayo. Here. Mr. Perednik. Here. Mr. Kowaleski.
Present.
Mr. Mayor.
Semper Fi.
Manager, Solicitor, Chief is here. You have a quorum, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Crack. Moving right along with the agenda, what is council's pleasure with regard to item 3?
Make a motion to approve the council minutes of February 10, 2015, and March 3, 2015.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Bowers, second by Mr. Prednick on the motion. Seeing no comments, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Mr. Crack, do we have any presentations this evening?
No, sir.
Thank you. Item 5, public participation. We'll open up the first round of public participation. I'll invite any members of the public that wish to come forward to do so. Please sign in, identify yourself and whether or not you're a borough resident, and please keep comments to 5 minutes.
Hi, good evening. My name is Sarah Weber, and I live on Mill Street in Phoenixville. And we have a petition signed by a majority of our street asking for permitted parking on our street.
Great, you can hand that up if you'd like. Anything else?
Nope, just
Okay.
asking for the permitted parking.
I believe Mr. Crack was informing me that there was the parking hearing or parking committee meeting
Yes.
that has made a recommendation to policy. They'll be meeting in March, and if they make a recommendation, something will be coming before council on April to schedule and advertise for a hearing in May.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ellie Akampora, Ellie's Choice, 211 Bridge Street. I'm also the owner of my property. Everybody knows that it's been on Facebook about the windows from the pizzerias, both of them. And last year, I actually had a crazy lady throw a brick through one of my tenants' windows. And this is becoming a problem. We need a police officer dedicated to that area. The plaza is an albatross. It's dirty. They urinate all over the benches. They curse, cigarette butts. Dogs go to the bathroom. They urinate in the fountain. It's just a mess. The people hanging out in there, not good. It's costing businesses. We have businesses wanting to come here to Phoenixville. They watched that plaza. That plaza turned them off. They don't want to come here. They left. And they watch it for a month. Michael had called me and asked me would I come tonight and give my views. Well, I'm giving it to you. I was president of the Business Association many years ago when we fought to have the first bicycle police officer, and that was Dave Wakely. The Business Association paid for most of his bike, and he was dedicated to downtown. we did not have the problems that we're having now. First Fridays are going to be coming up. They gather at that plaza, and people in wheelchairs can't even get by. People are afraid to walk by. People are actually afraid to come in my area because of the crowds and the gangs and the cursing and the spitting and the chewing gum. We have the dirtiest section of Bridge Street, which we never had before. And it's disgusting. And I'm really getting very upset with what goes on. I mean, how would you like people to spit all over your sidewalk? You know, they don't care. The gum, they don't care. People just don't care. Now, I'm not saying it's people from Phoenixville. I'm saying they could be from anywhere. And anybody could have threw that brick. But the woman who actually threw the brick in our building was from Phoenixville. She was a real nutcase. But had an officer been there, maybe, just maybe, that brick wouldn't have hit. So we now have to replace the window because we've had it boarded up because it happened late last year. But this should not be. We never had this. We have been very good. We came when the hookers and the druggies were out peddling on the street, and we got rid of all that, and it's all coming back. And maybe you guys don't see it, but we see it. All of you get paychecks. Guess what? I don't get a paycheck unless I do business. And let me tell you, it's not funny sometimes. It's very sad. So we really need an officer dedicated for downtown. We need somebody right there. Frank's Italian Delight, unfortunately, they could not be here for circumstances. Gail has had problems where some guy tried to run her and her daughter over in the parking lot in the back of them. They've had a couple incidences. Jaworski's Music Store, he hasn't had any, but he is all for another police officer to be brought in downtown. We don't have a dog anymore. A dog would help, but we just don't. So I'm leaving this in your hands. This is going to be up to you guys, but we need help. And if we don't get help, you're going to start losing businesses. You start losing businesses, you're going to lose tax dollars. You need to wake up, and we need to get this rolling. Now, the businesses are willing to help, but you got to help us. And without that, it's going to go nowhere. And First Fridays, well, maybe 2 years ago, year and a half ago, I had 2 kids fist fighting and almost went through my plate glass windows. We had to call the police. Thank God Dave Wakely was close by and he responded. But the thing is, these things should not be happening. As far as I'm concerned, you could demolish that plaza. It could go away. And I'd be just as happy, and so would a lot of other people. And we're not the only people noticing it. Other people notice it. We're starting to get a bad reputation. And that's the way you want to go. Well, that's sad because you're going to lose at the end. So that's all I have to say, and I think we need to get on board, and it'd be great maybe if we had a meeting of the merchants, see how they feel. And I'm talking, you know, just a few of you, and see how we feel. We pay taxes. We have a right. We didn't ask for that plaza. We didn't want it. So I think we need to get on board and have a meeting with the downtown businesses. Maybe you, Mr. President, you don't know me. I don't know you, but I'm one of the most outspoken people, and I'm a fighter. Chief knows. So anyhow, that's all I have to say.
Thank you. I believe that's going to be an issue on the Police and Personnel Committee meeting coming up, so I would invite merchants to attend those meetings because that's going to be a discussion point there for recommendations to council.
My name is John Colarusso. I'm here in case there's any questions or dialogue required on a HARB application that we submitted. We're led to believe by our second go-around with HARB that it was a more compelling, more accurate, and thorough application. hopefully you find the same. And if there's questions, myself or Jim Lally would be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Navindra Patel. Everybody say me, my customers told me, Nick. I have a store here, 218 Bridge Street. It's called Save More Discount Center. And a couple of weeks ago, I have a tragedy over there. Somebody robbed me at a gunpoint. So I have concern about a security, like a safety for customer and like business owner and all public. So please do something for safety. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Hama Bohosian. I'm the owner of the Express Pizza. Sunday evening around 9:30, persons, they throw bricks through the window to my pizza shop. Thankfully, there was no customer sitting, but the big glass window that I have, it's basically damaged, and right now we have a piece of plywood, and just waiting to get the right glass delivered and installed. This is the first time I've been there, close to 4 years, the first time. I believe happened to some other businesses same night. And like Nick said, the only thing we're asking is a little bit more, security for us, for our people, for our customers. Because if this continues, obviously, we're going to suffer, people not showing up, not coming. As it is, my restaurant's name is all over the internet. I haven't seen it. People are telling me. It's in Facebook. And I don't think that's a good thing. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Patrick Lowry, 235 Washington Avenue. I'm a 10-year resident of the borough. I've stood here at this podium previously to advocate for hiring a 29th police officer, and I would urge the council to revisit that proposal and to go through with it. In light of obviously the more recent events that have happened, unfortunately there's a stronger case tonight than there was a few months ago even to add an additional officer, in addition to other security measures that I'm sure could be taken. Nobody can promise or guarantee that these kinds of things won't happen again, but at least you would be able to say that you did everything that was in your power. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, council people, council president, the mayor, other dignitaries. I've been here on this subject before, and it just so happens that we have a lot of problems. If we had addressed these things earlier, we may not have had as many. I'm here tonight to repeat my past encouragement for the council to add a 29th officer. This is in light of the recent armed robbery in the downtown area. There's also 20 car break-ins in the Cemetery Lane area recently. Sunday, my understanding is there was a lot of damaged criminal vandalism downtown. The hiring of the 29th officer was started in 2007. by the Borough Council. They made a study on a basis of a population of 16,000 residents. Their finding was we should have 32 police officers. Presently, we have a population of 17,000 plus a large number of illegal immigrants. We also have an additional 1,000 new residential units coming into the borough. Subsequent councils have seemed to have a negative bias against the police department. They've tried to reduce and delay the hiring of new police officers. The layoff that was tried by these councils failed due to the efforts of the citizens of the borough. I cannot understand how a borough council member cannot support the police. The following are the steps needed to correct the current crime wave in the borough. 1, the Civil Service Committee needs to have an expedited list of police candidates before the old list expires. Now, my understanding is that they're going to wait until the old list expires, and then they're going to start processing the new list. Well, that is not very good management in my eyes. You should be starting that process before the old list expires. If we lose an officer, then we have to wait 6 months to hire somebody. Doesn't make any sense. Number 2, hire a 29th officer now. Again, this will send a message. Begin the process to obtain a police dog who is certified in drug recovery and search and rescue. Children get lost, older people get lost, that dog would help in that situation. Install cameras in the high crime areas that the police officers in their cars can access when they get a call in that area. 5, increase bicycle patrols in the downtown area as well as other high crime areas. If the criminals see that you're serious about stopping crime, maybe they'll go someplace else. Maybe our people won't be the victims. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I am here tonight to address a few things. Most important on my list is the drug dealing in town. It is rampant not only in my building, but in the building next door. So I have reached out to the police and asked them to hang out in the church parking lot across the street and whatnot, because it's around the clock now, and it's very scary. The fact that there is a shortage of officers, as everybody's starting to make mention of, I go for 30 officers instead of 29, quite frankly. We really, really need the support of the borough, of the police, and everyone else. I actually, when I moved in, my mailman let me know how rampant drugs were on Church Street and surrounding areas, so that is very distressing and a great concern. I definitely support hiring more officers, particularly on the weekends. There should be additional, if possible. So those are two things that I wanted to address. And also, I would like to bring attention to the atrocious sidewalks. I think it's time to start fining homeowners and whatnot if their properties are not upkept. I am not in a wheelchair. However, I do know people that are. And myself, I have back issues, so I have to drag everything around in a backpack on wheels because I can't handle the weight on my back. So I'm getting jarred and tripping over sidewalks as I'm trying to maneuver around town. So I think it's time. I would like to see the sidewalks fixed, and I would like to see the additional officers, and I would like to see the drug use, the dealing, It's horrible. It's horrible. It's on the first floor of my building and the third floor of the building next to me. So there's two buildings side by side. It's scary, you know? It's very scary. So I implore your help, and I guess that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of Borough Council, Mayor. I'm referring to under Policy Committee, item F, 1 and 2. I guess taking 2 first. Item 10, public hearings. So if we were to change the public hearing policy, would there not be those 2 hearings tonight on changing these ordinances and the tree codes? Would they not be held then, or not be required to be held? I understand Borough Council can still hold them, but right now, they're kind of, any ordinance change, I think, is required to have a public hearing. Is that correct?
I'm not sure I follow you, Dr. Sanik. Your question, right now, everything that the Borough of Phoenixville has an expanded, its policy is expanded beyond the MPC as far as what is
Right,
subject to
right.
public hearings.
I guess I'll just bring it to a conclusion and say I think you ought to keep it the way it is. Maybe it takes a little bit longer. In fact, I think it would be a good idea to actually explain in these public hearings a one-line explanation of just what is being changed. I just think it's a little bit more informative to the public, so I'm saying we should keep it the way that is. The other item 1, regarding Wilson Street, I was wondering, has the committee looked into if that is to be vacated, the ramifications of whether there's other uses for it, possible emergency uses or some sort of that sort, whether they've looked at it, not just the financials, but how else might it be needed in the future before that's vacated. So just bring that out.
Thank you, Dr. Sanik. I believe the committee has vetted it, so I think they've considered.
All right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Seeing no further public participation, we'll close that round of public participation and move on to appointments and public resolutions. Couple items here. Just want to acknowledge that Tina Peters, who has served for a long time on the Planning Commission, has elected not to be reappointed. Her last meeting, I believe, will be this Thursday, and I would like to ask Mr. Crack to prepare the resolution that we do, recognizing her long tenure on the Planning Commission. So no other action is required from council on that. Mr. Kuznar.
I just wanted to say a thank you to Mrs. Peters, even though she's not here for her years of service. She's been with us for a very long time and has been very prompt until, of course, recent events. I've been very prompt to her meetings, and I appreciate that of her.
Thank you, Mr. Kuznar. Mr. Prednick?
So since Mr. Kuzner brought it up, I'll just add that I echo his feelings as well, and that she was a great teacher to everybody that came on board to the Planning Commission, and she really did a good part for our town.
Thank you, Mr. Prednick. Moving on to item B, we have a resignation that has been submitted by Joshua Schricker for the Zoning Hearing Board, so we'll need a motion to accept that resignation.
I'll make a motion to accept the resignation of Joshua Stricker from the Zoning Hearing Board.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Prednick, second by Mr. Dalton. Any comment on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. And Mr. Crack, again, I'll ask that you prepare a resolution for council's consideration next month. And then I'll do my annual call to residents of the borough that are interested in serving on the various boards and commissions. There usually is an opening at some point during any given year on any of the boards or commissions. So if you have any interest, look on the website, come into the borough, speak to Mr. Cracker, the individuals at the windows. They can help you get the appropriate information to make those submissions. Mr. Brednick?
I'll do my usual request to Mr. Crank. Can you just quickly tell us the openings, and hopefully that spikes in interest in some of the people listening?
Absolutely. With the departure of Ms. Peters, there will be an open seat on the Planning Commission. That's from effective March 31st. There is currently an open seat that would possibly come up on the Recreation Board. That would be April of this year. There is a potential seat on HARB that would come up in August of this year. There are currently 1 vacant and 2 coming up on the Beautification Advisory Committee. That would be October of this year. And there is still a vacant alternate position on the Civil Service Commission, which would be basically, it's open at this point in time, and the current term would serve through 2020. So it's got a shelf life.
Thank you, Mr. Crack. Moving on to item 7, communications and council participation. Mr. Kuznar?
Yes, I'll try to be as brief as I can with this. I just wanted to address the, as police personnel and public safety chair, I wanted to address the concerns a lot of residents have regarding the crime issues in the area, particularly Bridge Street. Recently, we had a crime of vandalism that occurred at the Express Pizza Parlor and then moved on to Vecchia. Now, I know vandalism happens a lot, but I just want some people to understand the severity of this particular incident. It was extremely brazen. A person broke a window, a brick fell where an individual could have possibly been eating. It was at 8:50 at night on Bridge Street where a lot of people could have seen. Rather than running and hiding like most criminals do, this individual then walked 1 more block up and did it again. So this is a very vindictive, aggressive crime that was committed. So I mean, I do understand the concerns of a lot of the residents, which is why I gave a lot of handouts to members of council, particularly to address the Children's Plaza and Bank Street. Bank Street and Children's Plaza, we have Save More, which was recently robbed at gunpoint. And we have the Children's Plaza, which is located right next to Express Pizza and Grill. The photos I show you, and I stapled some of them out of order, but any photo you see with vandalism is vandalism that has occurred on Bank Street itself. For as small as a street as it is, it experiences a lot of vandalism. I know we have an ordinance out that requires property owners to take care of that, but I feel it's also our responsibility as a borough to make sure that we address these issues. I'm going to try to say this next part as short and sweet as I can until I go on to the 4 points that I would like to bring up that I think would be very helpful in bringing this area back up. Pottstown, where I used to live, when I'm reading in the news, has a pretty heavy reputation for being big in crime. What a lot of people don't understand, though, is that the majority of crime happening in Pottstown is really only happening on 3 streets, Washington, Franklin, and Beach. We're seeing a pattern on Bridge Street, which Chief Mossman will clarify later on, since January 1st, has had over 900 calls to dispatch. So on Bridge Street alone, there's been 900 calls for emergency services. That's a lot for just 1 street. The reason I'm bringing up Pottstown is that a lot of their crime is being focused on specific streets. We see this not as bad as what's going on at Pottstown, but we see something arising. We see a pattern. We see a lot of the crime not just happening on a particular street, but we're looking at Bank Street and seeing a large amount of crime happening there. So in the packet that I had sent you, and you know, we don't need to get into the specifics of this. This is just me introducing it to you. I'd like this to be sent to police personnel and public safety where we can go into it more in depth. But the 4 points that I would like to address is, of course, bike patrol. Increasing the number of hours that police are out on bike patrol. Police on bike patrol, their primary purpose is to patrol Bridge Street. I don't know if having 2 is something that's even doable, but police officers on bicycles would have heard the window smashing. Police officers on bicycles may potentially have, especially if they were patrolling Bridge Street, caught the individual who had pointed a gun I'm sorry if I say his last name wrong, Mr. Protect's head. You know, the guy came in, pointed a gun at his head, took his money. The next is, the next that I think would definitely have helped catch the vandals, and most certainly would have assisted in catching the armed robber, is technology that would give us an idea of what's going on in that particular area. It's a very small street, Children's Plaza, then right up Bank Street. That's where all that vandalism's located. That's where we're seeing high amounts of crime. These two incidents that I have mentioned, Chief Mossman can probably fill us in a little bit later on, are just the tip of the iceberg. They're the most serious crimes that have happened, but like what's going on in Pottstown, we see a problem area, and I'd rather be proactive than reactive and let it get that serious. The third point being something a little bit smaller, police officers tend to leave the borough using Mill Street. I would like them to start using the front entrance, as long as they're not on a call, because using Mill Street helps them get there quicker. But if they're just going out on a patrol, I think leaving through the front entrance of the borough, making a left on Bridge Street, would increase the presence of police officer vehicles in that area. The first point of the four-point plan that I'm bringing up is, of course, the hiring of the 29th officer, which many people already know that I strongly support. Recently, I almost fell out of my chair. A member of council had not announced his or her support for this 29th officer, but said they're leaning more towards considering it. And I also had another very good conversation with President Kovaleski this morning regarding that as well. So though that's something down the road, and I'm very welcome to adding more than just 4 points here, I feel that being proactive in addressing what's going on Bridge Street and what's going on High Street, though I haven't mentioned High Street much, there is a heavy amount of crime going on there as well. I had requested, and I don't want to take up too much time doing this, but I had requested police reports for Bridge Street. I had asked them for them too early for me to have gotten them, but if Chief Mossman, if best you can, could you explain? I know there's a lot of restaurants and bars there. I know there's a lot of rental units and a heavy, dense population, but do you feel Bridge Street, especially in the 200 block, 100 block, 300 block, has a higher density of crime than normal? I mean, 900 calls to 900 emergency calls sounds like a lot to me.
There's certainly a lot of activity in the 200 block, specifically 1 and 200 block of Bridge Street. You know, the crime is going to be where the people are. So if you have, like for instance, last weekend we had the pre-St. Patrick's Day pub crawl, where they're importing people to drink as much as they can downtown, and that's going to create intoxication. It's going to start fights. It's going to start domestics. It's going to have public drunkenness, public urination, disorderly conduct. These are all things that would be typical when you have 7 or 8 drinking establishments in 2.5 blocks. And at your request, we ran the numbers, and since the beginning of the year till now, roughly 2 months, we've had about 975 calls just there, in addition to everything else in the borough. But it does draw our manpower quite a bit. It draws our attention to that section of town, because when you have your first Fridays and there's thousands of people that are into town, that's where we have to be. I mean, that's where the crime's going to take place. That's where the most intoxicated people grouped into one place make bad decisions, and your DUIs and your people backing into each other's cars by accident and things along those lines. We do have dedicated bike patrol officers downtown. We have 2 bike patrol officers now. We used to have just 1 for years and years. And in 2010, we added a second bike patrol officer so that we'd have an officer there every single day. So between the 2 officers, they generally work 7 days a week, between 8 and 12 hours a day until 3 o'clock in the morning. But that said, you know, you got one guy working Monday and Tuesday, the other guy working Wednesday, Thursday, then the first guy comes back Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and so they overlap because the two guys can't work 24 hours a day. And if those guys are on vacation, or if they're away for training, or if they have court or for some reason they're somewhere other than downtown, then we don't have that officer down there. And that happens for weeks. I mean, some of these guys have 3 and 4 weeks of vacation, and they have days worth of training and court hearings that they have to go to during the day. So they trade off their night work for being in Westchester Court 9 o'clock in the morning. And we also kind of suspend the bike patrol in the wintertime, you know, because you can't ride a bike on ice and snow. And you know, we just spent about a month and a half, it's somewhere between 5 and 15 degrees out there. And, you know, if one of these guys gets hurt and they're out for months, when we really need them come springtime, right about this time of year is when we need them. So when the weather breaks and the snow and the ice are off there and it's safe to ride down the sidewalks again on bikes, we'll bring the bike patrol back. But just so you know, the officers that are dedicated to the bike patrol in the downtown district, when they're not on bikes, they're in cars or they're out on foot. Still highly concentrated in the downtown area is their main sector of patrol, and they will get out and they will go on foot for periods of time. But if the platoon's running short of manpower for some reason, if we make several arrests or there's a big fight somewhere and 2 or 3 guys are off at that fight, that officer will then get on patrol and start handling calls instead of backing them up. So there will be times when the officer is distracted. If he's in the 100 block and somebody throws a brick through the window in the 300 block, you know, he might not see him because of the crest of the hill and the hundreds of people that are down there. A lot of people won't throw a brick through the window when the cop is standing there. They'll see where he is and then go some other place and commit the crime. So obviously, the more police presence, the less likely somebody's going to act up. But as far as, you know, I'm not trying to downplay the bricks through the window, but it was one person who threw a brick through 2 windows, and literally if one person broke every single window in the businesses downtown, it's not a crime spree. It's one guy who, for whatever reason, smashed out a bunch of windows that night. So Ellie left, but the woman who had the mental issues, psychological issues, you know, we got her. We didn't get the guy who threw the brick through these 2 windows. And I would agree that if every weekend we start seeing bricks being thrown through through windows, we have an issue. One person drunk or one person mad that, you know, something happened and then they acted up by smashing out a car window or spiking a tire or something like that isn't a crime spree. It's one person acting up, which again, if the officer had been there in the vicinity, we probably could have found them. Or if there were cameras downtown, it would certainly give us a stronger lead on what the person looked like, where they went, if they got into a vehicle, what direction they headed when they left.
And just to clarify, I wasn't trying to use the brick through the window as any type of scare tactic or anything like that. My real point for focusing on it is that a lot of the crime, the serious crime, does seem to be focusing within a certain area. And I think by focusing our attention on those areas, like I said, being proactive rather than reactive, we can stop the growth of it. And I do want members of the public to know, and anybody else listening, that all members of council are taking this very seriously. Like I mentioned, members of council who weren't in favor of hiring a 29th officer are now speaking about it as if it's something they might consider. And it's definitely something we're taking seriously. So we thank you for your concerns.
Mr. Prednick?
I just want to, 2 things, I'll make it fairly quick. So when we have a monthly police personnel and safety meeting, you know, Chief, I think this is something that's just worth a little more elaborate discussion. I know you can't maybe divulge exactly routes and patrol routes and different plans because for various reasons those need to be kept private. But just if we can have a discussion at that time, at least if there's plans on adding more foot patrol, maybe adding the bike patrol, if those kinds of things will change, at least having more of that elaborate discussion at the police personnel and safety. Or at least if you, between now and then, can, with your staff, come up with other ideas, other options that we might have, potentially entertain it there. The other part that I kind of want to reassure the public watching is that when Mr. Kuzner talks about technology, We do have a technology subcommittee on new infrastructure. Mr. Bowers, myself, and a couple other members of council have talked about how can we use technology to potentially keep people safer, and look at things like cameras, sensors, other options out there. So I can assure you we'll be asking for it to be put on the agenda for the next infrastructure meeting. And we'll, as Mr. Kuzner said, everybody's taking it seriously, and we'll look what we can do.
Ms. Mao?
Thank you. I had a couple questions for the chief, if I may. Last year, during budget season, I did say that I would support the hiring of the 29th officer this year, and I do plan to do that this year. But I did want to ask, with that being said, how can we hire a 29th officer and make that officer strictly a beat cop? Because that's what I'm hearing is the problem, is Bridge Street, and it's becoming more of a problem. And I want to see how we can focus our attention, the attention of the 29th officer specifically on Bridge Street. I can say, I live close to, not far from Bridge Street, and I can say that I personally see patrols all the time. I mean, they're up and down my street all the time, up and down Main Street all the time. You know, I do see a very large police presence in our town, but, you know, I've said this before, and I do think that we need a specific beat cop kind of officer. So how hard is that to do? I mean, what could we hire somebody that would be specifically for Bridge Street, specifically for Friday, Saturday, Sunday night, or Wednesday through Sunday night, or walking, whatever it would take?
I suppose we could probably work something like that out. Right now, with the manpower that we have in the department is with regard to patrol. We have 4 platoons that are manned by 5 people. One's a sergeant, one's a corporal, and 3 patrolmen. The town is roughly 4 square miles, and we have the town broken into 3 zones. So each zone is roughly 1.1, 1.2 square miles. So one police officer is responsible for everything that happens in that 1.3 square miles. So from Bridge Street to the entire north side, one officer patrols that. From Bridge Street to Nut Road, fully east to west, one officer patrols that. And from Nut Road, the entire south side of town, one officer patrols that, which leaves a sergeant and a corporal. Most of the time, and we have a minimum manpower of 2 officers from 3 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon, and a minimum manpower of 3 officers from 3 in the afternoon until 3 a.m. So if we're down to that manpower situation, if we have 3 officers working, that's literally every zone is taken with no real supervisor doing anything. If we get 1 prisoner, then that officer has to watch the prisoner. Somebody has to come in on overtime. Typically, we run 3 to 4 people because there's always somebody sick or on vacation or on training or away for some reason. We never have really ever 5 people running it. So the zones are full, and we have 1 supervisor that acts as a floater. And so if you get a DUI arrest, while you're the next 3 hours dealing with that DUI, that supervisor is now taking the calls in that zone. If you hire a police officer to try to make him strictly downtown, then the question, you know, like you said, is when do you want that officer? We'd have to, you know, you'd have to hire the police officer and say, this is your schedule. You will work 3P to 3A, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. That probably would burn a guy out pretty quickly if every single weekend. I mean, all he does is come in on weekends and deal with the drunks downtown and the issues, but it's something that could be done. It's better to rotate people into that. But with the recognition that officer is still going to have sick time and vacation time and training time, and he's not going to be there every single time. It's just kind of the redundancy is built in by having more officers than you actually need at any one time, with the recognition that there will be police officers out. We have a police officer that's been injured for months. We have a police officer that was injured for over a year. We had police officers that get deployed for a year in Afghanistan or Iraq. And, this all is, puts a strain on the couple of guys that are left. So, to answer your question, you could hire that 29th officer, and we could create, if the mayor wants to do them with council, we could create, like, this is your assignment would be to do a walking tour downtown, which is pretty much what we have right now with 2 police officers who, pretty much their assignment, their beat, the 2 bike patrol officers, is the 1, 2, and 300 block. They will go up to, they'll go up to Church Street, they'll do the library, they'll go on to High Street sometimes, and if we have, for instance, if there's a residential neighborhood on the south side of town, we have a lot of cars being broken into. Sometimes we'll put them up there on bike because they're much more difficult to see a guy on a bike at night than a car with all the lights and everything coming down the street. So every once in a while they'll get temporary assignments, but pretty much we already have 2 officers that are assigned full-time downtown. And if you hired another police officer and designated him as a beat officer downtown, it could be done.
I know for instance, I mean, several years ago, I went on a ride-along with an officer when I was fresh on the council, and it was eye-opening how much, officers, how quickly they respond, how many officers respond at one time to a call, and I know if I was going to commit a criminal act, I wouldn't see a cop walking down the street and do it right in front of them. I mean, I don't want to go to jail. But, so there is some validity in that if there is somebody walking down Bridge Street, people are not stupid enough, well, most people aren't stupid enough to do something in front of a cop like that. So, it's a problem, that has 2 sides to it. So, but I just wanted to say again that I know that there are, some issues that have recently happened, but I do feel that our police force does a fantastic job. And again, I live close to Bridge Street, and I feel very safe in my neighborhood. I see them all the time, and I think, that they should be commended for that.
The downtown is kind of a victim of its own success. Because it's so successful down there, it's such a huge draw, so many people and so many different events that draw people from far and wide, all the demographics mixing. You're going to have, we have these issues because of the success of the downtown. So, I agree, as long as we can kind of keep ahead of it, and we're in a much better position than a lot of other municipalities are because of our presence downtown, because the tone that the police department has said is what behavior will be acceptable and what isn't. And as long as we're around to see it, we're happy to enforce it.
Any other council participation? Seeing none, we'll move on to new business. The first item of new business, I believe Mr. Crack would like to make an introduction.
Sure. As you know, back in November, we were notified that Mr. Neese, our finance director, was leaving to take on a manager's position in another municipality. Over that course of time, unfortunately, the holidays were a bad time to advertise, but we went out in January of this year, went through the advertising process, went through a significant number of resumes, and I'd like to introduce tonight Mary Ann Nagel as our new finance director for the borough. She started yesterday. Mary Ann, and you can come up and just say a word or two, but Mary Ann is, she comes to us with at least 10 years of quality experience in other municipalities. She was doing temporary work for Westchester. Mr. Mayor, you would be noted that Mayor Comita was quite upset with me for taking her away from Westchester, but I'm very proud that we did, and I think we're going to have a good run here with Ms. Dugan and her finance committee, and see what 2015 brings us. So I'm proud to welcome her to our staff.
On behalf of council, welcome aboard.
Thank you. Everybody's welcomed me very well so far.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Crack. Any other new business? Mr. Prednick.
So a couple months ago, we had put out an RFP for a solicitor. I'd like to thank, first of all, Mr. Crack and staff for going through that process, putting it out there. It was very diligently done. I'd like to thank all of the solicitors or potential solicitors that came out last session last week. Took the time to interview, actually came out in the middle of a bit of a storm there. I know some of them drove for a couple of hours that day, so I wanted to thank each one of them for taking that time out of their day to come out here, stand in front of us for about half an hour, talk about themselves, their law firm, what they do, their history, and I thank each one of them. With that, I do want to make a motion to award the solicitor RFP to Wolf, Baldwin, and Associates of Pottstown. I'd like to ask that it be effective at the conclusion of tonight's council meeting.
I'll second that motion.
Motion by Mr. Prednick, second by Mr. Dalton. On the motion. Ms. Dugan.
I have some serious issues here. According to my, what we have here, I kind of don't understand why we wouldn't go to continue along with the solicitor that we have right now for a savings of an extra $10 from our current rate, which would actually be great to put towards maybe adding that extra officer that we're talking about. There are so many projects we have with Parks and Rec we're trying to start with. That's a significant savings, and I think it's fiscally irresponsible to do that, to not accept that. There is no problem with our current representation, and also this is something that we put the borough manager in a situation where he has to train a new firm, and this happening in the middle of a council, when we're expecting a new council to come in January. This might end up happening all over again, and this puts him in a really, like Gene, in a really, really bad position to have to keep doing this over and over again. We just did this a little over a year ago, and to do it again right now, and plus with the extra $10 in savings, really we have things that we could put that towards, and it wouldn't hurt our budget if we got some of these things even this year. So I can't imagine why we wouldn't continue with what we currently have.
Ms. Mayo.
Just to second what Dana, what Ms. Dugan has just said, I'm not in favor of spending more when I feel that our current representation is perfectly fine. I don't want to spend more in legal fees. I can't imagine why anybody else on council would want to either.
Mr. Richter.
I want to commend Mr. Crack on conducting this open and transparent RFP process. I appreciate that. I think it was done with class, and I think it was done on point as well. I'm disappointed that I wasn't able to show up last week, but after studying the RFPs and listening to some feedback, I don't think it's possible to stick with the current firm. And that's because the RFP was submitted under Freeman Schuman, and the representation that was presented at last meeting was for the law offices of Sean Kilkenny. And from what I know, I do not have an RFP for the law offices of Sean Kilkenny, and therefore I don't know what that firm is, how many lawyers are going to be representing that firm, and anything else really that was put through the RFP mechanism like the rest of the law firms. So I think if the council people that are interested in keeping the current solicitor are going to push for that, then the only way to do that would be to vacate the current RFP process and start all over again. I don't think it's transparent to keep a firm who clearly is not what was represented in the RFP that was conducted.
Mr. Kuzner.
If I just may say, is Wolf Baldwin here tonight? Well, if I would just say, when I was looking at various firms, I noticed that they come from Pottstown. I'm just basically saying why I support them. They come from Pottstown. They've been there for 20 years. I'm from Pottstown originally, and I'm telling you, without a doubt, you might think you know what it's like being on a rough or wild borough council, but nothing comes to Pottstown. I mean, there's constant protests outside of the borough. There's constant change in seats. There's constant turmoil going on all the time. And for a solicitor to sit through all that shows me a lack of the politics. I mean, I feel that this solicitor is what the borough needs because they were not, they're just not as political as a lot of solicitor firms were. The firm, the Kilkenny law firm, came in by means of a political maneuver. And I did everything in my power when I was looking through these RFPs to find the least political firm possible. And though that's hard to do sometimes, when I thought about the fact that a solicitor had survived in one of the most political boroughs you can imagine, I was very impressed by that. Not to mention the fact that Pottstown and Phoenixville have a lot of similarities. You know, they have a hospital, they're a borough. There's just a lot of things that Pottstown and Phoenixville have in common, and that's why I'm throwing my support behind Wolf Baldwin.
Well, I'll put my 2 cents in at this point. During last month or last week's meeting, to Mr. Richter's point, yes, the law firm of Friedman Schumann switched to the law firm of Sean Kilkenny, but it was presented to us that it was going to be the individuals that were servicing the borough at this time were going to be part of that law firm. So it wasn't going to change. There was going to be no ramp up required, and they were reducing their rates from 135 to 125, which was the lowest rate we received. So and because I haven't heard any complaints about their services over the last 14 months, I don't see any reason to switch or change. I understand that it is going to change from Friedman Schumann to the law offices of Sean Kilkenny, but the team is going to stay the same, the representation is going to stay the same, and we're getting a better rate. So I don't see it.
It's a different entity, correct?
I acknowledge that, Mr. Richter. Yes, I did.
I'm asking because I obviously was not here, but it
Yes.
is a completely different entity.
It is a different entity with the same attorneys.
Okay.
Anything further? Seeing none, I believe we'll probably need a roll call on this. Mr. Crack.
Mr. Bowers?
Yes.
Mr. Dalton? Yes. Ms. Dugan? Yes. Mr. Richter? Yes. Mr. Kusnar?
Yes.
Ms. Mayo? No. Mr. Prednick?
Yes.
Mr. Kowaleski?
No.
Motion passes 5-3.
Thank you, Mr. Crack.
I do want to make a point that my motion was to make it effective at the end of the meeting. So I want to make sure we have a solicitor for the rest of the meeting.
That's why I didn't ask Ms. McDonald to step down at this point. Thank you, Mr. Prednick. Any other new business? Seeing none, we'll move on to resolutions. Mr. Prednick.
Sorry, I didn't have another one. I forgot to pull up my notes here. I have two, and I'll make it really quick. So one was the letter I got from School of Kuntao. Just I was asked to read out in public, and I apologize if I should have brought this up with public participation. But on Wednesday, April 16th, 2015, Kuntao Club will host the 4th Annual Baton World War II South Pacific Veterans Annual Ceremony. They will honor those American and Filipino soldiers, sailors, Marines who died and served in the Battle of Bataan Death March and the World War II South Pacific Theater of Combat. The event will also host and include their partners, VFW Post 7145, KFAAI, Capitan Filipino American Association of Chester County, and the Filipino American Association of Philadelphia. For those who don't know, Kuntao is a martial arts school, a Filipino and Chinese cultural center in the Franklin Commons, and they did ask that this be read in public and extended to everybody to again attend April 16th, 7:30 to 8:30. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prednick. Now moving on to resolutions. I don't believe we have. Ms. Mayo.
Can I still bring something up under new business?
Absolutely.
I believe somewhere is a petition for from the Mill Street residents asking for them to be added to the Zone A?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I haven't seen it yet, but I do believe that it's a majority.
looking at the numbers that are here, it's probably a supermajority.
Okay. So I'd like to make a motion to add the residents of Mill Street to Zone A.
Second?
Okay.
Motion by Ms. Mao, second by Mr. Perednik. Do we need a public hearing on this? Because it's a change to the ordinance.
Yes, typically what would have, so, you know, I understand your motion. Normally what would happen is it would go to policy in March. Policy would give it to council to schedule and advertise in April for a public hearing in May. If I understand your vote, what you're asking for is to vacate going directly through policy, schedule and advertise tonight for the April meeting. Got it. I can do that.
My apologies, yes.
So with that amendment to the original motion, is the seconder? Yes. Okay. So the motion would be to schedule and advertise a public hearing for an ordinance change to add Mill Street to the Zone A parking designation. Any comments? Mr. Richter?
This council has been very big on processes and steps to get things done, and I feel like we are taking a monumental step back with this one. Although I'm happy that the Mill Street residents showed up, and ultimately I will most likely support it. It has not gone through policy. I have not seen the actual petition, which I would like to visibly see with my own eyes, and I would ask that it go through the normal channels.
Mr. Perednik?
That was actually one of the things I wanted to elaborate as soon as we opened up, that the reason I second for this motion is I think that there's a lot of public support for this and something that's needed. I know Jen and Mike have heard from the public about this, something that's very important, and I think it's something that needs to be attention to the floor, and my hope was to create this discussion, but at the same time, as Mr. Rector pointed out, follow the process and hopefully have it go through policy and have this follow the normal process that it needs to follow.
Mr. Kuznar, and then Ms. Mayo.
I would like for Ms. Mayo to go first, just in case she's about to say what I'm going to say.
Okay, we did address the issue, just so for everybody's edification, we did address the issue of following, you know, the normal course of business, going through policy, so on and so forth. The resident, in our parking steering committee meeting, the residents have a serious problem now, and yes, we normally would go through policy and schedule and all of that. I think Mr. Kuznar and I, just being the representatives for that particular area, we just don't want to hold things up any longer than they really have to be. And we can make exceptions to our own rules on occasion. And this is a time where I think we just have a really big problem there. The residents need to have some parking. They want to be added to the permitting area, and we have done this before. We recently did it for Gay Street when we added Gay Street. So I would just hope that everybody would move this forward. Thank you.
Mr. Bowers?
I think Gay Street did go through the process, though. I think I believe in the end it did make it to an ordinance which was scheduled and advertised. Another question is, under the permitting process, how many spaces are permitted per household?
There are two, and then they can get a third, which would be a temporary, a visitor pass.
Part of the consideration for taking this action, shouldn't it be whether there is even physically enough space on the street?
Well, all of our, the proviso that we have with everything is that the permit entitles you above all others to park, but there is absolutely no guarantee that you may park because of the volume of cars versus available spaces.
Does the permit then give the resident the permission to park in the parking lots?
No, sir.
Mr. Kuznar?
Per the public hearing, I don't know if we chose a date on that yet, but would it go through, so say the public hearing is next council meeting. I know we have a policy meeting coming up before that. Would this go through that policy meeting? Or is it possible for this to go through that policy meeting? Just, I don't mind the process, and I want every council member here, if they vote for it, to feel like the process was done properly and that they're comfortable with it. I don't, for time's sake, because these residents have been contacting me for months, if it's possible, I would like that to be added to Mr. Dalton's agenda before the public hearing, so we can at least get that out of the way, if that's possible. I don't know how that process works exactly.
To your point, this is only to schedule, the motion on the floor is only to schedule and advertise, which means that council will have to have a public hearing on it in April. There is an intervening policy committee meeting that this could be discussed, and there could be a recommendation coming out of policy at that time. What this does is expedite, in my mind, cut off a 1 month waiting period. So we can still have a recommendation, a yay or nay recommendation from policy at the April meeting for the public hearing, which could then be acted upon.
That was exactly my concern, Mr. President. Thank you.
Actually, that's not true.
What's not?
Because if I schedule the document that I need to prepare, to Mr. Richter's point, you're not going to see that document, and I'm going to wind up advertising before the policy committee to meet advertising requirements for an ordinance. There's a timeline for that. If you change that coming out of policy, you may as well just go through the normal process, because it's going to be called a substantive change, and therefore you'd be right back to the same schedule that you're trying to avoid bypassing tonight. So it's a little technical in what I'm saying, but the reality is, you say schedule and advertise for a public hearing for the April 14th meeting. I'm going to do that. I'm going to draft a document, and then you're not going to see it as all of council. While the policy committee might see that at their March meeting, if they make a change, it makes what I've just done moot. So, to Mr. Richter's point, if you just follow I understand the want and the desire to try to move this thing forward, but ordinances are technical. There's a process that we try to adhere to and to follow. By going through the policy, we vet the final changes, get that to you in the April meeting, and then you get scheduled for the May meeting, and it's blessed at the May meeting.
Then if that happens at the policy meeting, is it possible to then reschedule for the new hearing on what was made in policy?
The April 14th meeting, your March meeting, I believe that I could fall within the window of advertising after the policy committee with the changes and just re-advertise it. I'd spend $150 to re-advertise it, but that would be it.
How do you do that without a majority of council asking you to reschedule? Because at that point, it's just coming out of committee.
Well, it's not rescheduling. The date, in fact, reschedules. I would have to send a modified document to the newspaper and to the to the county. That's, to your point, I understand the desire, but everything that we've done thus far when it comes to parking is every group has had their issues, and every group has had to wait to follow the process. It's not insurmountable. Ms. Mayo has a motion on the floor, and there's a second. We can do it that way. But historically, we have, even though it's meant to delay, we have followed that process precisely for the very reason you've put on the floor here.
Mr. Brednick.
And that's the discussion I was hoping for. I wanted the public to see that there's a process, and then we can go through this and we can make it happen, but there's a process we need to follow. And thanks, Mr. Crank, for clarifying how that works. So just so we're on the same page, the intention is it's going to go to policy. We'll discuss it in policy. There'll be a recommendation made from there. That will go to council. And then at that point, then it can be scheduled, unless we go with the motion that's on the table. But
That's correct. If the motion passes, we move forward tonight. If the motion doesn't pass, then it's back to basics.
So at most, we're only talking about an extra month, asking the residents to wait, and we're still going through the proper process, reviewing their signatures, reviewing all the facts.
That's correct.
I think asking the residents to wait another month, I don't think is the end of the world. I mean, we're not asking for 6 months or 3 months, it's just 1 month.
Respectfully, you don't live there.
Mr. Bowers?
I think as Ms. Peters was anguishing over her decision whether to pursue another term on Planning Commission, I advised Ms. Peters that our Police and Personnel Committee requires an interview process. Now, it was a difficult thing to tell Ms. Peters, as senior, a public servant and volunteer as she is, that she would need to interview in front of the Police and Personnel Committee. But it's what this council has decided as a policy, as a procedure, and I needed to respect that first and foremost. So again, I think we have a process for this, and it seems fitting that it go through committee and escalate through committee.
So, is there a point then in even scheduling a public hearing?
There's a motion on the floor that we need to resolve. So if you're of the opinion no, then any other discussion on this issue? Seeing that we've had a lot of discussion on both sides, I think another roll call might be appropriate.
Mr. Dalton? No. Ms. Dugan? No. Mr. Richter? No. Mr. Kuznar?
Yes.
Ms. Mayo? Yes. Mr. Prednick?
No.
Mr. Bowers?
No.
Mr. Kowaleski?
Yes.
Motion fails. 3-5.
Motion fails 3-5. For the third time, any other new business before we move on? All right, seeing none. Resolutions, I believe you said we had none?
Correct.
Okay. Moving on to item 10, public hearings. We have 2 on the agenda. What is council's pleasure with regard to those items?
I'll make a motion to open up a public hearing for considering an ordinance amending Chapter 15 Motor Vehicles and Traffic, Part 4, General Parking Regulations, Section 15406, Handicap Parking Zones of the Code of the Borough of Phoenixville.
Motion by Mr. Richter, second by Mr. Dalton. On the motion to open the public hearing. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 6-0 with Mr. Kuznar and Ms. Mayo out of the room. Ms. McDonald?
Thank you, Mr. Kowaleski. 2 exhibits to enter in tonight. The first is Borough 1, which would be the advertisement for the ordinance, and the second being Borough 2, which is the proposed ordinance itself.
Thank you. Mr. Crack?
Oh. Okay, what you have before you tonight is a change to the handicap parking zone section of Chapter 15. Basically, you're adding a parking zone on Columbia Avenue on the north side, a handicap parking spot on Lincoln Avenue on the west side, on Washington Avenue on the north side, and you are removing one from Penn Street on the south side.
Thank you, Mr. Crack. We'll open up public participation on this issue. If any members of the public wish to come forward and speak, I encourage them to do so. Seeing none, we'll close that round of public participation. Any council participation on the matter? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing. Motion by Mr. Dalton. Second by Mr. Perednik to close the public hearing. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 6-0 again with Mr. Kuznar and Ms. Mayo out of the room.
Mr. President, I'll make a motion to approve the ordinance amending Chapter 15 Motor Vehicles and Traffic, Part 4, General Parking Regulations, Section 15406, Handicap Parking Zones of the Code of the Borough of Phoenixville.
Motion by Mr. Richter, second by Mr. Dalton. On the motion, seeing no discussion, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 6-0 with Mr. Kuznar and Ms. Mayo out of the room.
Mr. President, I'll make a motion to open the public hearing considering an ordinance amending Chapter 25 Trees of the Code of the Borough of Phoenixville.
Motion by Mr. Richter, second by Mr. Dalton. On the motion to open the public hearing. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of opening the public hearing? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0 with Mr. Kuznar out of the room. Ms. McDonald?
Thank you, Mr. Kowalski. Two exhibits again for this hearing, the first being the advertisement for the ordinance, and the second being the Borough 2 being the proposed ordinance itself.
Thank you. Mr. Crack, can you give us a little background?
After a lengthy 2-year process, we've finally gotten to this point in changing information within the tree section of the Chapter 25. Going back in time, there was a concern of council as to its ability to sustain the tree trimming and tree removal process with over 2,500 borough trees in the borough. And from a budget perspective, initially there was a desire to possibly turn those trees back over to the general population. Subsequently, councils past and this council has continued to properly budget the Tree Advisory Commission in order to do its job and sustain the trimming and removal of trees as necessary. That changed the dynamic in what needed to be changed in the tree ordinance. And so what you have before you are cosmetic changes in language and then some additions of language that, for example, we didn't have the ability to address trimming over top of sidewalks and over top of streets. That kind of language is now in here, and after properly vetting it through council and the policy committee for the past several months, it's now ready for your proposal to move it forward and ordain it.
Thank you, Mr. Crack. I just make one correction. It's been about 3 years because it's been on policy since I joined council.
Fair enough.
With that said, I'll open up the public participation portion of this public hearing. If any members of the public wish to speak on this issue, I invite them to come forward. Please remember to sign in, identify yourself as and acknowledge whether or not you're a borough resident.
David Sanic, borough resident. I guess my only question is regarding the trees, who has the right to trim the trees? Is that addressed in this ordinance? I mean, does the borough control the tree trimming, or how does that work?
The tree
Is that something that's cleared up in here?
The tree trimming has remained the same. If it's a borough tree, you have to make the application to the Tree Advisory Commission, I believe. Yes.
So that doesn't change?
That has not changed.
That's the only question I have.
Seeing no further public participation, we'll close that round of public participation and open up council participation on this issue. Mr. Prednick?
So I just want to ask, Mr. Craig, for clarification. So when it says things like stumps shall be removed, because I've gotten this question from residents in my area, that everything that's in here applies to the borough as well. So if the borough removes a tree, the borough has to remove that stump, right?
That's correct.
Thank you.
I'll just say I appreciate staff's effort on this. It was it's a long way, a long road that we got to here. I also want to thank council's continued support of the Tree Advisory Commission and funding that and the removal and trimming of the trees. I think it's an important item, and I know it's of major concern for a lot of our constituents out there, so I'm very happy to see where we ended up on this. Any other council participation? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Make motion to close the hearing?
Motion by Mr. Bowers, second by Mr. Perednik on the motion. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0.
Mr. President, I'll make a motion to approve the ordinance amending Chapter 25 Trees of the Code of the Borough of Phoenixville.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Richter, second by Mr. Dalton on that motion. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Moving on to item 11, reports of committees, boards, and commissions. Planning Commission.
And specifically, the letter from Planning Commission regarding downtown parking. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bowers. Regional planning?
No action to report, nothing discussed in regional pertain to Phoenixville.
Thank you. Harb?
Okay, I've got a couple things here. I'll make a motion to approve the sign request for 202 Bridge Street as recommended by HARB, the HARB action memo of March 3rd, 2015, and also to approve the modification of storefront request by 202 Bridge Street as recommended by council. And also, I'm adding that the applicant must agree to return the property to its original look upon termination of occupancy.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Dugan, second by Mr. Kuznar. On the motion?
Can I ask the motion be repeated, just for clarity?
I'm just asking that the applicant return it to, agree to return it to the original look, how it originally was upon the termination of occupancy.
So it has nothing to do with 1 or 2?
One was just the signs. The
Okay.
second part was the actual modification of the storefront.
Okay.
Any other discussion on this motion? Mr. Bowers?
I just think it's reasonable that we ask the applicant of 202 Bridge Street to comment on whether that motion presents a burden to him.
I believe the applicant's here. Mr. Colarusso, if you'd like to come forward.
I don't think it's an unreasonable burden. Consistent with the recommendations of HARB, if we were to not occupy and the next use need entrances, each entrance should have an alcove. I think that's the intent of where Dana's going, is that after further discussion, we realized that we could meet the intent of the guidelines if each entrance to the building preserved an alcove. So if we need to add entrances for a new use later, if we were to subdivide later, you'd want that to be an alcove. And to match the similar trim and facade and all of that. I don't think that's an unreasonable burden.
Thank you, Mr. Colarusso. Mr. Richter?
Could I ask that the motion potentially be amended to be a little bit more specific then on that final point? I'm okay with it, especially if the motion maker, or excuse me, if the applicant is, but I think there's been some discussion about the variations from time to time, so just making the blanket statement, return it to an original state. I don't know exactly what the original state is. So if it's that we want the alcoves back, or that we want it to the state as of a certain date, maybe something along those lines?
Just getting over a cold here. Yeah, I think I can amend that just to be the look from the alcoves, or from what date? Wait, maybe the end of the last year, I guess. Do you have a date in mind? Please come up.
To get you where I think you want to go, is that we agree that if any entrances are added, that entrances are added with alcoves, without regard to going back to any specific date, that you just really want any addition of alcove, any addition of entrances in the future will require an alcove.
Okay.
Does that get you where I think you want to go?
It's getting there. I'm just trying to figure out how to phrase this so that we can. Can I change, Mr. Crack? Can I change my motion right now, or?
You can amend your motion if the seconder is in agreement with you.
Okay. Who is this? Who seconded? You did.
No, it was Mr. Perednik, I thought.
No, I think so.
Okay, whatever. Okay.
We can withdraw the motion on the floor and then make a new motion. That might be clearer at this point.
Okay, I'll withdraw the motion then.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, so why don't we take a second stab at it?
Okay, so I'm going to have to do all. I should have broken these up. I'd like to make a motion to approve the sign request for 202 Bridge Street as recommended by HARB, Action Memo, March 3rd, 2015, and also approve the modification of storefront requested by 202 Bridge Street with the applicant's consent to return it to the original alcove alcove entrances upon termination of occupancy. Does that sound?
Motion by Ms. Dugan, second by Mr. Richter. On that motion, Ms. Mayo.
What guarantee is there that the applicant will in fact do that? I mean, I know that, you know, if it's in our motion and it's in our minutes and, you know, whatever, I mean, is there a security deposit that we can take for that? Is there, you know, what other steps can we take to make sure that that gets done? Who's going to know? I mean, what if the codes officer now isn't the codes officer when they leave? And how are they going to know that they have to do that? And I'm concerned about how it's going to be when they actually leave.
I believe Mr. Crack can address that.
Ms. Mayo, we have a property file for every single property in the borough, and when this is approved, a copy of this is put, a copy of the application is put in there, a copy of these minutes will be in there, and that information will be available to whomever is here when they open up the file to review it for the next applicant, because whatever happens will have to come back through HARB. They'll have to go into the file, they'll look and see what was done previously, and they'll see the notes in there. That's how we trigger that. We also trigger it in our permit enforce system, then flag that information in there. We do this all the time with various properties, so that we constantly have change, and in order to make sure that your will is protected down the road, we put that stuff into the systems, both paper copy and technology-wise.
Mr. Bowers.
Just highlight that the applicant's application of March 3rd, 2015 does include photographic evidence of the existing condition as well.
Any other comment? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? One abstain. I abstain for the same reasons I mentioned last month. Yeah. Anything else from HARB? No. Okay, thank you. Rec Board.
Okay, I have a couple updates to let you know about. The next family night out will be on Saturday, March 21st at 1 o'clock in Reeves Park. This is an Easter egg hunt, so make sure you come on out and join that fun. They're having a spring break mini camp, which will be held April 1st and 2nd at Schuylkill Elementary from 9 to 12:30 in the afternoon for 6 to 12-year-olds for $40. They'll have crafts, games, gym time. You can contact the rec department for more information on that. And finally, I'd like to congratulate the February Father of the Month, Mark Forshaw, who was nominated by his daughter, Eleanor. So congratulations to him.
Thank you, Ms. Dugan. Moving on to item 12, council action referred from committee, police and personnel.
I would like to make a motion to consider the permanent appointment of Officer Andrew Brown, recommended in committee 3-0. Chief Mossman had sent us a letter indicating that Andrew Brown has performed very satisfactory, and there's been no issues with him.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Kuznar, second by Mr. Bowers. On the motion, seeing no discussion, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0.
Now, were you going to say something, Mr. Prednick?
No, I can write something unrelated.
Now, I don't have my laptop. I had left it in my apartment. Unfortunately, there were members that were supposed to show up to police personnel and public safety for reappointment to be interviewed. They're very prominent members of the community. I would like, if anybody out there knows them, to contact them and let them know that we have a new policy where we like to interview people to be reappointed to committees. I, for instance, don't know how long I'm going to be on Borough Council. Might be 8 years, might be 12 years, but 12 years down the line, if I want to be on Planning Commission and this policy still stands, I will gladly go in front of the new council and allow them to interview me. So please, members that are up for reappointment, I am aware of who they are. They are, as I mentioned, very prominent members of Phoenixville. They do a lot for the community, and I would hate to see them not get reappointed simply because they feel, just for lack of a better terms, it's beneath them to come and interview themselves thus, if that's the reason why they didn't show up. But again, if anybody knows them or knows how to contact them, please let them know. We look forward to interviewing them. The interview with the gentleman who Jeremy Dalton knew, who was, I forget the position he was interviewing for, but that was terrific meeting him. And I don't think I would have been able to meet him any other way. You look confused. You probably don't.
It's Jason Baird. I think it's in front of Jason Baird, or?
It doesn't matter. He was a great guy. That's all I'm trying to say. And I would just urge anybody who's up for reappointment to come see me at my committee, Police Personnel and Public Safety, and allow us to reappoint you for another term to whatever committee it is that you're up for. And I believe, that being said, I don't have any motions to make for reappointments, and I'm very sad to say that because some of the people on this list were people who have done a lot for the borough. Thank you. That is all.
Parks and Rec?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Can I get one thing before we go real quick?
Yeah, after Parks and Rec.
As part of police and safety.
After Parks and Rec, Mr. Brednick, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Crack, did everyone get a copy of this on their desk?
They didn't, I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem. So we received a temporary community event at our meeting at 6 o'clock today for the Chester County Red, White, and Brew Run. It's a 5K and 1 mile kids fun run with a half marathon, post-race wine beer festival, etc. It's a long weekend. We just received this at committee, so instead of turning away the applicant actually came back and stayed to answer questions. Quite honestly, this application is rather thin to begin with. That's why we asked them to stay, so that questions could be asked. I think this is a very positive event, and it's worth some discussion. So if it would please Mr. President and Council, I would ask that the applicant be allowed to come to the podium and talk a little bit about their event.
Do we have any copies for the rest of council of that application?
My mistake, I do not have those.
Okay. Yes, I mean, they're here, so we might as well hear them out. I don't like the fact, yeah, I don't like the fact that we don't have any knowledge of this at this point.
I agree with you.
I appreciate your time and hearing us out. My name is Greg Edavanger with the Chester County Conference of Visitors Bureau, Director of Sales. Again, we are here to promote tourism and direct economic impact related to tourism events. And I have with me the applicants for this event, which I feel is very positive for the area. Kathleen and Todd.
And thank you very much. My name is Kathleen Titus, and I am with New Era Events and my partner Todd Strauss. And as Greg Edavanger had said, we've been working with Chester County for over a year trying to produce a half marathon, which is an event that the county currently does not have. We're looking to bring in an economic impact for a long weekend where we would put on a family event with a 5K, 1 mile fun run for kids on a Saturday, and then the half marathon being on a Sunday. The timing of this, we would have liked to have been longer, but trying to find the right location, the right time. We've kind of had to go through some channels. We've talked to zoning, we've talked to the police here to try to go through logistics on how that would work within the borough, to be cognizant of not only the people living here, but again, the police, PennDOT, and working with the outlying partners as we would have to go into Spring City. So we apologize for the shortness on this. It was just trying to find the right time. And with the Hard Rock Marathon not taking place this year in late September due to the Popel's visit, we thought timing of the September 11th, 12th, 13th would be ideal to launch this for Chester County, because now those applicants who would be, and runners who would be normally running in September are now forced to run at the end of October, beginning of November. So ideally, we would have liked to have been on this docket much earlier, but just trying to get through the logistics to make sure that we had the proper distance, we had the proper facilities, was the infrastructure in place, was the county and the borough reciprocal to this? Were they interested in this? The timing kind of brings us right to the March deadline, and obviously waiting until April would then put us in a position where we wouldn't be able to market the event until May. So we apologize for the shortness on getting this application, but we thought it was imperative to get it to you sooner than later to see if we could work through some of those logistics. And again, with the backing of the county itself and the Conference and Visitors Bureau promoting this as a tourist to drive economic impact into the region.
Any questions for the applicants? Mr. Prednick?
I'm just curious, you mentioned that if you have an approval in April, which would be April 10th, you wouldn't be able to advertise till May. Why would you not be able to start advertising April 11th, right after it's approved?
Because we're looking at the timeline of still trying to get vendors and sponsors. So if you're looking at April, we get approved April 10th. We're not able to really hit the ground running until probably the beginning of May for us to get all the ducks in a row. If we've got approval, then we still have to go back and say, what is the, identify the exact course location. Right now, currently what you have is a little bit longer. We're looking to cut that back. We need to go into Spring City and some outlying partners. So until we know that this is approved or there's interest there to move this in a positive direction, we don't want to reach out to all the outlining partners to only find out in April this could be yanked back, and then are we back to the beginning? But also you're still talking about April 10th, we get the, okay, we're going to move forward with this. We're still looking at probably the beginning of May, which would just push us back an extra month. And being it's a September event and you're trying to draw upwards of 2,500 to 5,000 people, not only to mention national media such as Runner's World and some of the larger publications going out to the running community, when you're looking at a September race, they're in publication print as of April. So we don't want to miss that deadline in any critical news mass media that we could get out to that is actually looking at publication in September, which is producing their media in March and April.
Mr. Richter.
And I do apologize for this. I mean, obviously it was sprung on committee as well as council, so I apologize for that. I felt it necessary, given the presentation that this group gave, the county backing that there seemingly is, and the potential for an extreme financial impact in the borough. I thought it was worth bringing to council. I'm not necessarily asking for approval at this point in time, but just some healthy discussion as to whether or not this is something we would entertain.
Mr. Bowers?
The name suggests that there is an alcohol component to this race, or shouldn't say the race specifically, but the event. So I'm presuming we have a bit of a problem with alcohol on public public land, public space that we might have to deal with.
Mr. Bowers, in our application, we do have a thing in there about alcohol, and that's primarily as it relates to events that occur in our parks. Council has historically allowed the alcohol to be served in events that take place where the streets or the parking lots becomes the primary location for the events. Such would be the case with this race. The start and finish of the race would be Main Street and our parking lots. I've also gotten an affirmation from the Foundry that although they have a wedding on the Sunday of the race, the wedding is in the evening, and their vendors would be able to come in from a different direction and not impede the impact of the race. So it's not uncommon for council to approve so long as the event organizers have the proper licensing, which they would have to do for both brew pub, microbreweries and local wineries. They would have to get that licensing. But knowing the Visitors and Convention Bureau, knowing the group, I don't see that as the issue. It's just whether or not council wants to continue its allowing those events on public street and closing off for security purposes, et cetera, and then the parking lots, which we have done in the past.
Also, if I could just add, the alcohol component of it is also county driven, and it's to highlight wineries and brewers within Chester County to make it a complete Chester County event. So the idea is it's a post-race festival. It's essentially a wine and beer festival after the race for the participants and their families. So it's not just Miller Lite that's going to be out there, but we want to bring in Sly Fox, Victory, Boxcar, the different county brewers, as well as the vineyards from Chad's Ford, black walnut and so forth.
Mr. Perednik?
I just want to make sure I understand clearly. So if you don't get a vote today, or at least you get maybe a nod of interest, but not an actual official vote, I understand you can't advertise until May, and you can't hit the ground running till May and all those things, but the event could still happen. You just will have one less month. Is that fair to say?
Well, it puts us in a tough position, and I think what we were hoping to obtain today was at least a positive vibe, because the approval for Phoenixville is just one cog in the big picture. We need to go to Spring City. We need to go to East Pikeland. We need to work with the vendors for the festival. We need to work with industry sponsors. There's a lot of other things that have to happen that can't happen until we have the base venue basically solidified. So that being said, we need to leave here with a warm, fuzzy feeling. Agree? You know, like we understand that there's a lot of emptiness on the application because there are so many cogs that we had a 30,000 foot conversation with police on roads and course, and that needs to be drilled down on to know exactly when the roads are going to be closed, what can be barricaded, what can be flagger force, what has to be police. So there's a lot more that has to go into it, but again, it's not worth going through those steps if it's not going to get past council to go to that. You know, it's kind of a putting the cart before the horse, chicken or an egg kind of thing.
Mr. Perednik?
So, I mean, I'll just share my opinion and give you my fuzzy feeling that, I mean, I think it's a good event. You're going to bring a lot of people in. I'm not crazy about the relation to alcohol and encouragement of alcohol, but other than that, you're bringing 2,500 to 5,000 people into the borough. You're advertising the borough. From my perspective, it's a good event. I just see the application as parts like the tents, with, comment in there that says TBD and then based on number of vendors and location. I understand you have to establish those things, but I would like to see under quantity and number, even if it's 50 and 10 by 10, then at least we know it cannot exceed that number, and at least that gives us something to reference. I'd also like to see the route at least closer to finalized, at least what you guys believe would be more closely. If it changes, that's understandable. And then finally, all the sections towards the back, from the police, public works, parks and rec, I'd like to see those all sign off. I'd like to have the chief weigh in on the police perspective on this as well. Not tonight, of course, but give them the proper time to do the work that they need to do.
Ms. Mayo and then Mr. Richter.
This is nothing personal. I just want you to know that, first and foremost. But I really feel like what's good for the gander is good for the goose. You know what? We just had another issue up here with permits and extending the Zone A, and we have to go through all the regular process. And you know what? We need to go through the regular process with this too. I know we just went through it with Parks and Rec, and I was the one that made the motion for it to move forward with special provisions. Why are we doing this when we didn't do that? It doesn't make any sense.
We're not doing anything yet because we don't have a motion on the floor. So I think if we're going to continue this dialogue, we should at least have that at this point.
That's what I was going to step in with, just so we had some discussion. I will go ahead and make a motion to approve the Chester County Red, White, and Brew Run September 12th through 13th, pending approval of police, public works, parks and rec, fire codes manager, and the allocation of appropriate fees with a completed TCE event application no later than May 1st.
I'll second that.
Motion by Mr. Richter, second by Mr. Dalton. So now on that motion, let's continue the discussion to the extent council wishes to. Mr. Bowers.
Well, just ask, though, I don't believe the applicants are asking or seeking a motion tonight. They're seeking opinions. And I'll give my opinion. I support it. I think that your motion details what needs to be completed. And completing those satisfactorily is the risk. But I support the concept. I support the event. I'm not comfortable, I think, for consistency reasons, that we actually have a formal motion. So if we proceed with a formal motion, I'm going to vote no, but don't take that as not a statement of support.
Mr. Prednick.
I'll just echo the same as Mr. Bowers, and I agree with Ms. Mayo.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I was just curious, with the route and all these streets here, should this be approved, are the applicants providing parade marshals or guards at all these intersections? Is that a firm commitment that would be made?
Yes, yes. We would either have course marshals, we would have flagger force out there, and then where PennDOT and police were needed for the crossings over 113, we would work with them to minimize that and to keep it rolling. Our goal behind this is not to lock up a lot of major roads. It's to have a rolling closure, opening, but that we would man most of those course marshals, except for where we were duly noted that PennDOT or police need to be there.
Any other discussion on the motion? Just to echo some of the sentiments of other council people, I think this could be a great event for the borough. It's definitely a large event. For that reason, I can't support an approval of a TCE tonight, but I want to continue the dialogue. I think it could be a great event. I think it will be a great event as long as we cross all our T's and dot our I's to make sure it is for the borough and make sure that the residents are accounted for, because this is a big event. So don't take my no vote as a no to the event. I support the event. I just can't support approving the TCE tonight. Any other discussion? Seeing none, on the motion to approve the TCE, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Nay. I think we need a roll call on that because I couldn't count those votes.
Ms. Dugan.
Yes.
Mr. Richter. Yes. Mr. Kuznar.
Yes.
Ms. Mayo. No. Mr. Prednick.
No.
Mr. Bowers.
No.
Mr. Dalton. Yes. Mr. Kowaleski.
No.
Mr. Mayor.
I believe we need more research, but this time I'm going to vote no.
Motion fails 4-5.
Thank you, Mr. Crack. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else from Parks and Rec?
There is in your packet an item for the Friendship Field Use Agreement. So I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to approve the Friendship Field Use Agreement.
Hearing no second? Okay. Motion by Mr. Richter, second by Ms. Dugan. On the motion. Mr. Crack, can you provide some outline for the people in the audience and at home?
Sure. Renaissance Academy, as it comes online in the school year of 2015, August timeframe, doesn't have recreational facilities around the building that it is currently building. And they do have the need to have some recreational facilities for specific sports, soccer, softball, and the like. They came to Parks and Rec, and Ms. Gibbons and I talked to them about what was needed, brought that information to the Parks and Rec Committee itself. We've vacillated back and forth on what the impact would be as it relates to the borough's own events, and then, of course, the use of the park at any given time. And it was determined that the hours that they were seeking for the approval was appropriate, that it wouldn't impact unnecessarily on the overall use of the park, and that it would not impact on any of the borough's own recreation events. And as such, rather than run them through the temporary community event process, which really wouldn't give the kind of detail or is actually unnecessary, we asked them to just put together a short one-page agreement that this is what they were going to used the fields for, that they would agree to the fees that we would typically assign, and that they would agree to do some other things with adding dirt and stuff for the park. So what you have before you is that all sieved down into a one-page document, and we believe it's ready for your consideration and approval.
Mr. Prednick?
And I apologize if I missed that. You said that was in the packet?
I don't believe it was, because
Okay.
no, it's not in the packet. Yeah. To your question, no, that's the answer. Mr. Bowers?
Without that document being in the packet, without it being on the agenda, this is a real change in scope. It was my understanding, at least as it was discussed previously, that the Renaissance Academy would use the temporary community event vehicle to access the field, and I believe that we all supported that. So I'm not seeing this letter. I don't believe I could move forward with a vote on this.
Mr. Crack? Oh, Mr. Richter?
If it's all right with the seconder, Mr. President, I would like to remove my motion, knowing now that the council did not receive the information.
I will just that's fine, but I will clarify, we all got the Parks and Rec, but I did not pay attention to that packet, and so I didn't look it, so I didn't see it in there. The seconder was?
Ms. Dugan.
Ms. Dugan. Okay.
Could I also ask, I've been increasingly frustrated with the Parks and Rec meeting being an hour before this meeting. I feel like our committee continues to kind of be in this pattern of the information not being appropriately disseminated. If you wouldn't mind, maybe you and I can have a sidebar at some point, or entertain a movement of that meeting in the future.
I think you have some support from Mr. Crack on that. Yes, I think that discussion would be appropriate. Anything further from Parks and Rec? No, sir. Mr. Prednick, you had something previously. I didn't forget about you.
So I'll just make it short and sweet. I just, and it gives us a little bit of time to settle down. I talked to the police chief about this before. But on January 30th, I did witness around 6:25 p.m. there was an incident around Church and Washington Street, or sorry, not Church, Main or Gay in Washington. There was an incident that happened there. The police quickly jumped in. I think they saw about 4 or 5 officers. The vehicles came in there. I just want to commend the police and the officers that were at that location. I don't know about the details of the actual event that happened, but the precision in which was executed is not something that I've seen in about 15 years since I was in the military. So kudos to you guys and the officers for executing whatever happened that night with the precision they did, and thank you for their efforts.
Thank you, Mr. Prednick. Finance?
Where are we here? Okay, I would like to make a motion. I'm going to bundle all of these because there's nothing that we haven't discussed before. Make a motion to approve the 2014 prepaids dated 1/11/2015 to 2/14/2015 in the amount of $404,135.28. The approval of the 2015 prepaids dated 1/11/2015 to 2/14/2015 in the amount of $744,136.20. The approval of 2015 prepaids ACH dated 1/31/2015 in the amount of $2,533.80. And the budget increase 2015-05 for $31,846.68 from fund balance to legislative capital projects for the Borough Hall building costs for gates and mechanisms and security for the police fencing. And the budget increase request 2015-06 for $2,421 from fund balance to participant recreation capital improvements for the installation for the pipes at the Civic Center.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Dugan, second by Mr. Richter. I was hoping you would get it second because I didn't want you to have to repeat all of that. On that motion, Mr. Prednick?
Just to clarify for Mr. Crack, if you can specify there's no additional funds that we're taking from, this is already funds that were allocated already for the building.
Yes, sir. This comes out of the bond money.
Thank you.
Any other comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Anything else from infrastructure?
Nothing coming out of Infrastructure Committee for council action. I would just highlight that the Infrastructure Committee is looking forward to staff digesting the Match Point water distribution survey and advancing recommendations and to the committee and for further discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Economic development? Thank you. Policy?
Policy. I would like to make a motion to consider a policy to require a policy hearing prior to, a public hearing prior to the enactment of zoning or saldo ordinances per the MPC as recommended out of the committee 3-0.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Dalton, second by Mr. Bowers. On the motion?
I have questions on this one, actually. What public hearings would we be eliminating? Like, could you be more specific? Like, is it if we change an ordinance, are we eliminating that? I have no idea what exactly this refers to.
No, I think it's easier to say what's going to be included. So if it's zoning or saldo related, it would have a public hearing. Ordinances would not unless they were related to zoning or saldo somehow. So we would be getting rid of probably the vast majority of the public hearings that council has. If this is approved by council, that council has on its docket on a.
Okay, one of the things that I was concerned about is one of the major things we did in saving the rec board was having the public hearing, and we had all those people, and that was an ordinance change. I'm assuming that's the type of thing that we wouldn't be including anymore as far as a public hearing.
That would be correct. Yes.
Okay, well, for that type of reason and for ordinance changes like that, I can't approve this, so I'll be voting no.
Mr. Bowers.
I would just highlight, as we saw tonight with the HARB motion, we are permitted to ask Council President if we can have an applicant or the public comment on a motion that's on the floor. So I believe that we would still retain that ability to open up for public comment any motion that we feel deserves or warrants significant public comment.
The thing is, it does not get, I'm sorry,
Go right ahead.
The problem with that is just that it wouldn't be advertised enough so that people would not hear about it. It would just come up and go through, kind of like nobody would hear about it until after it happened. So that's why I don't support that.
Mr. Crack, you had a comment?
Sure. Just for clarification, purposes, all of the ordinances have to be properly advertised. No matter what section, all 27 chapters have to be advertised. So that process doesn't change one iota. They all have to be sent to the law library. They all have to be sent to the Mercury. They all have to be outside our door on the bulletin board. They're all on the borough's website. All of that, nothing of that changes. The only thing that this changes is the technical process that you went through earlier tonight, which is the motion, back and forth. Historically, council has not done all of that motion. They have merely, the president of council has merely said, I'm opening up for public input and closing public input. So I suspect that you would do the same thing. The formality, though, is a requirement as a public hearing by definition for subdivision land development ordinances, Chapter 22 and Chapter 27 zoning ordinances. That is an absolute requirement. The rest of it, though, I don't see it changing, but I understand your point.
Mr. Brodnick?
So, I mean, if we're still advertising all the ordinances that go on regardless, we're not really saving any money by doing this. It seems like it's just to speed up the process and the technicalities. My concern is, I think that's a worthwhile effort, but my concern is that it takes away the public's opportunity to comment as these things come up. I know that we sit here often, we'll open the public hearing, we'll close it, nobody comes up, and just go through the formality. But I think having that ordinance come up allowing it to schedule the public hearing for next month, giving the public a month to digest whatever's going on, and then having them have the opportunity to openly come up, I think is a good thing. And I'm kind of with Ms. Dugan on this. I don't believe this is a good idea to take this away in such a blanket way that says anything but zoning and ordinance doesn't get a public hearing. I know Mr. Bauer said that we can open it voluntarily, but I still like the fact that there's a process and the public is invited to come and comment every time. So I'll be voting no on this.
Mr. Richter.
I guess my issue is, and this came up with the rec board item as well, and Mr. Kowaleski brought it to our attention. The chair people of the committees serve at the pleasure of the president, and those chair people can be very open to the public and allow for participation. I think Mr. Kowaleski has done an excellent job of allowing that to happen, but that's not to say that every president would be the same way. Taking this away gets rid of the formal process where if there isn't a president that is that open and transparent, we lose that piece. And for that reason, I don't support this change.
And to your point, I serve at your guys' pleasure, so I could be changed as well. And for that reason, and the fact that I think I initially supported this motion or this idea concept, but think people change, everything changes. I think I'd rather have the formal process there so that we know that there's going to be input. At least we're saying that we want that input to continue. So while I acknowledge that it would be nice to shave a couple minutes off some of these meetings when they go on particularly long, I don't think we should do that at the cost of public participation or the potential for public participation. Any other comments? Seeing none? So just for clarification, a vote of yes supports the motion and a vote of no would say you don't want to make the change, because I've made that mistake on occasion. All those in favor of the motion? All those opposed to the motion? Nay.
Aye.
I think it actually goes 0-8, which, all right. I've never seen that before. Anything else from policy?
I actually have something I wanted to suggest. So earlier, we had the discussion on the public hearing for the permitting of Mill Street. Just so I understand it correctly, before I make a motion again that doesn't communicate well with the rest of members of council, the reason that that public hearing wouldn't have made sense is that it would have been on something that would have came out of policy that didn't exist yet, correct? President Kowaleski?
No, the schedule and advertising would have been for the motion that was put on the floor, so it would have been to simply add Mill Street to the Zone A. What would have come out of policy could have potentially changed that, which was part of the discussion and required a re-advertisement or rescheduling of a public hearing.
Then could I make a motion that provided what needs to come out of policy comes out of policy, we schedule a public hearing for the next council meeting? So I make the motion to schedule that meeting. If it fails in policy, then that meeting doesn't happen. The public hearing doesn't happen. Is everybody following me? And I'll explain why.
Mr. Kuznar, before you go on,
sure.
You've got a motion, so let's see if you get a second to have discussion on. You can explain your motion at that point.
I'll second his motion.
Okay.
I want to hear his discussion.
So right now, your motion is to schedule and advertise a hearing for the April meeting, subject to basically not a recommendation coming out of policy that changes what's being currently recommended, which is adding Mill Street to Zone A.
That's correct.
Okay. Which I think was the same motion, or the spirit of the same motion that was on the floor, but we've got it, so let's, if there's any other discussion on it. Seeing no, Ms. Mayo.
I'm sorry, I'm a little, I'm sorry I'm confused, but what exactly is happening?
Mr. Kuznar has made a motion with the same motion that you have made earlier, with the caveat that if it doesn't get supported out of policy, then that public hearing would be essentially canceled for April. which you can't cancel it. We'd have to take no action on it potentially as council or vote no. So, I mean, I think we're going down a bit of a rabbit hole here. I'm sorry, Mr. Bowers.
Thank you, Council President. There's a schedule and advertise cost here. It just doesn't seem like that's a direction we want to go in the event that the motion wouldn't be supported by action of policy.
Well, if the policy chair may speak on it, if he wishes, it's my understanding that it will go through policy. I mean, we have the support of the residents on Mill Street. They've been working very hard, doing a lot of diligence Mr. Bowers before. They've been doing a lot of diligence to make sure that the message is conveyed to us that they would like their block permitted. They've shown up to parking and steering committee meetings, so on and so forth. We've done this before. We've permitted blocks before. My motion is simply that provided everything goes through in policy, the meeting still stays. That way, you guys get to keep the process that you want to go through. I get to keep my promise to my residents that I was going to do what I could to get this going as fast as I can. You know, to me, basically what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to compromise rather than us, you know, both getting upset with each other that there was no communication. I'm just trying to find a place in the middle that I feel is advantageous for everybody. That's what I'm looking to do right now.
Any other discussion on the motion? Mr. Richter.
My 2 cents for what it's worth. I am not opposed to discussion on the permitting of Mill Street, and I don't want my lack of support of this to translate to that. I am, however, opposed to the way that we've handled parking in the past and permitting in the past, and seemingly everything related to vehicles downtown is at a snap of a finger. And I just can't continue to get on that cog. I think there needs to be logical discussion, which will obviously happen in policy. I don't think we need to jump the gun. I think we can let it go through policy, have policy come out with a recommendation to schedule, and make the discussion in April. I don't understand really what all of the sudden has triggered that this is a flashpoint must have to happen item, and I think that's where I'm coming from.
I'm simply just looking out for my residents that have been reaching out to me for the past 3 months. They've been showing up to meetings. They've been writing Mrs. Mayo and I emails. They've gotten petitions together where they have the majority of their block in favor of getting it permitted. And if we go to policy and, you know, we find out that there's issues with this, then according to the motion I'm making, the public hearing doesn't happen. And so, as I mentioned before, I'm just trying to find a way to meet everybody in the middle here so that we can all get this done, basically.
Mr. Perednik?
Yeah, I'm just with Mr. Eicher here. I mean, the fact that I don't like this cog of things being happening on a snap of a finger to make it happen. I mean, we voted no on it before, and we're not saying that we don't want the parking. We're not supportive of the residents, but we got to follow the process. I mean, this is a matter of convenience. It's not a matter of life and death and safety that we have to take action tonight. We want to help those residents, but we need to follow the process in order to do so. So, I mean, just all I ask is wait another month. Let's go through this properly. And if we've known about it for 3 months, then they should have come to policy 2 months ago.
They came to parking and steering instead of policy. So they have been coming to meetings and they have been contacting council members. That being said, I mean, the motion's on the floor. I'm in support of it. You guys do as you wish with it.
Mr. Bowers?
I'd just like to say, this isn't about you not fulfilling. This isn't about you not fulfilling your constituents' needs. I think it's just respecting a process that has been fairly well established. It is absolutely likely that next policy that this will be recommended to council. It's a month. It shifts this whole timeline a month, yes. It makes it a month longer than you've promised your residents, but I don't see that you've let your residents down. You've achieved what you committed to them to do, and it will get done.
If I may ask, I don't know if this is a question for a solicitor or President Kovaleski. Provided I show up to the policy meeting and it passes, is it possible to schedule to make a motion to? No.
No, you need council to do that.
So we need an entire quorum to do that. We couldn't even have, and there's not even an email vote you can do, or?
No.
So we would have to wait for the next council meeting and then schedule that at that council meeting for another month.
For a public hearing in May.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Does that require a second? Okay. We have a call for the vote, so why don't we do a roll call, because I think we did a roll call the last time. I think it was a close vote.
Sorry, we start with Mr. Richter? No. Mr. Kuznar?
Yes.
Ms. Mayo? No. Mr. Prednick?
No.
Mr. Bowers? No. Mr. Dalton? No. Ms. Dugan? No. Mr. Kovaleski?
No.
Motion fails 2-6.
Anything further from policy? With that, we'll open up the second round of public participation. I'll invite members of the public to come forward. Please remember to sign in, identify yourself, whether you're a borough resident, and please keep comments to 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I wanted to add my voice to those concerned about the violent crimes that have taken place in the last 2 weeks down on Bridge Street. As a resident and also a member of the Phoenixville Town Watch, I feel extreme alarm and grave concern. I personally live very close to both those locations. The brazen and violent nature of those crimes that took place during a time when I think of as prime time. You know, one was early in the morning, the other somewhat early in the evening. It wasn't like it was the wee hours of the morning. It was a time when many of us are likely on the street. I work here as well as live here, and it just hit really, really close to home, and I wanted to express that on a personal as well as a volunteer note. And I, of course, would put before you again our advocation for the 29th officer. I feel very strongly, as I said to all of you late last year when you were going through your budget planning process, that I hoped that we could be in a proactive mode and not a reactive mode when it comes to our security in this town. And I have to say that in light of recent events, it feels very much now like a reactive mode, and it doesn't lend to an atmosphere of security and attractive to either an individual investor or maybe a bigger investor. And I'm proud of this town. I'm glad to live here. In the 10+ years I've lived here, I felt pretty safe. But I got to tell you, there was a psychic shiver, I think, that went through me and through a lot of other people who have been contacting the Phoenixville Town Watch since then. So I appreciate the opportunity to say to you, I have grave concern at this point, and I urge you to consider the 29th officer in this next year, and to further consider any measures which the chief and the department may offer, whatever that might be, particularly for the business district. Save More is a place where I learned, you know, there's a large amount of cash in the transactions that take place in that store. I'm thinking twice about going in there and getting my paper sometimes now. And yet I want to support Mr. Patel and our other business owners. And I want to feel secure walking around on these streets. So please do consider whatever measures that it does take to keep this town safe. And as a volunteer, I am committed, as are the other persons in Phoenixville Town Watch, to doing what we can and to educating the community on how they can be involved as well, because it's our feeling that the more people who are alert and awake and looking out for each other, the safer that we will be. So thank you.
Thank you.
It's a long meeting, so I'll keep it short. Edwin Soto, 7 High Street. I just wanted to kind of address some of the issues that have been going on today with process here. You know, there was a lot of talk about how things need to go through a specific process in order to be approved. I can respect that, and for the sake of consistency, I don't see how I understand that the half marathon and the parking will more than likely make it through this council. I'm sure there's going to be much support behind that. But if there's going to be consistency on that, if you're going to bring up a motion like that, like the half marathon, right after stating that things need to go through process, you most certainly are going to sound hypocritical. So if you supported that and then denied the parking circumvention, I think that certainly speaks of how you think certain issues are more important than others. Clearly, both are important, and I hope to see them through too. And I'll add my voice to the concerned citizens over the height of crime. I understand also that there were more car break-ins over the past week as well. I could be misleading on that, but I think it's important to possibly look at what needs to happen in the budget to make some kind of impact, if not another officer. I think that it's important to start having that discussion now before things get out of hand. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Robert Romaine. I'm here this evening on behalf of the owners of Fillmore Village. I'm just wondering if I missed something. In the policy committee, there were 2 items listed, and only the one was discussed. Is something I missed about the first item?
Not, you didn't miss anything. There was no motion brought up, so no motion was made, so no discussion occurred.
Can I ask if there's anything further going to be done about that?
Mr. Romaine, I don't know what, I have nothing to give to you at this point because I don't know what the policy committee intentions are at this point.
Okay, I'm just reading here. It looked like it was recommended 3-0, and then there was just no discussion at all.
I was as surprised as you were that there wasn't any motion made.
Thank you very much.
Any other public participation? Seeing none, we'll close that round of public participation and move on to staff reports. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a few things I'd like to mention. This past month with the weather and everything, I'd just like to commend our first responders, our police, our firefighters, personnel in our streets department, water department, and the public works. We weren't hit as bad as Boston, but we did deal with quite a few weather issues with several water main breaks, and I just believe a well done to those personnel is I want to put it out there. And at this time, of course, you know, our department will be working on repairing all those potholes out there. So if you do see potholes, don't hesitate to call the Borough Hall to make sure we're alert at that particular location. Secondly, I'd just like to add, as far as the police department as having a well-maintained, well-trained police department, it's equally important to have the community involvement. The community being the eyes and ears for the department, communicating regularly, and despite our recent crime, I've seen tonight that community involvement stepping forward. I do believe our council here is supportive of our department. They're faced with many difficult decisions, but I do feel the support coming from the council. And I just want to say, we appreciate the involvement of the community, their communication with us within the police department. And thirdly, I'd just like to mention that on March 21st, the Phoenixville Fire Department is holding their annual fundraiser, Night at the Races. And that's located at Church Street, and the doors will open at 6 p.m. So thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Crack.
Mr. President, I have a couple of items here. Just for clarification, I know the mayor mentioned the issue of potholes and snow plowing and what have you. I think sometimes the public doesn't understand one area that needs to be understood, and that is when it comes to routes 113, 29, and 23, as they come through the borough, Star Street, Black Rock Road, Nut Road, and what have you, those are all PennDOT handled. And so PennDOT is responsible for the potholes, filling the potholes, the plowing, the salting, and all of that. We recognize that maybe it wasn't necessarily a stellar job this time around, and I know Ms. Kowaleski, you have reached out to our state legislators to try and address that issue. I'd also like to remind folks that West Bridge Street and Pothouse Road are also state roads, meaning that the PennDOT is the one that does the plowing on that. I know it seems like we're not there to take care of those roads, but there's a pecking order, and PennDOT is the one that handles that. We are going to have some meetings, though, I think, in the future based on the communication that you put forth, where we'll try to figure out if maybe there's a way that the borough can, in fact, take care of that and take care of ourselves internally here. Two other items. In your packet, you would have received a notification from the law firm of Nauman Smith representing Norfolk Southern. What they are intending to do is remove what we commonly refer to as the bathtub. That's the area where the railroad track crosses a road, and the track actually sits in this tub. It looks like they're petitioning the PUC to remove that at Pothouse and Charlestown Road, and also then turn that into a true four-way intersection. Right now, there's a fifth signal there that kind of messes things up. So the intent of this is to take and remove all of those things. The question is, if they do that, it's one more nail in the coffin of that rail line will unlikely come back to the borough. So if it's council's will and you want to oppose the application, we would need to send something to the PUC. If it's your intent to just let it ride, then we shall do that. And then lastly, I know last month it seemed a little hurried as it related to the RFP for the information centers. At your request, at your direction, I should say, I went back out to the two firms that submitted, got revised information, rediscussion with the firms, renewed quotes as it relates to the kiosk. And in my memorandum to you, I have made a recommendation that we go with Urban Sign for the not-to-exceed dollar amount of $52,000, which is $7,500 less than the budget that we have. But I also asked that in your approval that at least 3 members of council, no more than 4, of course, but at least 3 members of council be willing to participate with us in the design team so that we can, if you concur with my recommendation tonight, we can move forward and get these designed, and that council can be assured that we adhere to wayfinding and any other things that you're concerned about as far as these kiosks go.
Mr. Prednick.
So I'd like to make a motion to approve the memorandum for the information, to accept the RFP from, sorry, I just lost it. Chris, do you want to take it? You have your hand up.
Urban sign? Urban sign?
So I'll start over. I'd like to make a motion to accept the RFP from Urban Sign for an amount not to exceed $52,000 for the development and installation of the information centers.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Prednick, second by Mr. Bowers on that motion. Mr. Prednick?
I'd just like to thank Mr. Crack and staff for going back through and doing due diligence and taking their time to get the details and come back to us again.
Any other discussion?
I apologize. I'm going to abstain from this vote because I was out and didn't hear it.
Okay. Any other discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 6-1-1 with Mr. Ichter voting no and Mr. Kuznar abstaining. To Mr. Crack's point, he would like, I guess I'll call it an ad hoc committee to assist. Ms. Dugan, anyone else? Mr. Prednick? And I'll throw myself in there as the third for you. What's that? If you can be the alternate, Mr. Dunn. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Crack. Co-directors, Public Works, Fire Chief, excuse me, and the Finance Director are in the packet. Mr. Bowers?
Sorry, I was hoping I could ask a question of the manager.
Sure.
Thank you. Regarding the action being proposed by Norfolk Southern, can you interpret, perhaps, from your experience, why they are taking this action?
As they did earlier, about 3 years ago at the intersection of 29 and I forget the name of the road, maybe it's Charlestown Road, as it comes right adjacent to the turnpike. The railroad tracks on the, if you're going out of town on the left-hand side, crossed over 29, and the intersection was consistently out of kilter because the signals at that location were designed to accommodate the trains that would come through there periodically. So they were never really consistent with good timing and what have you. Norfolk Southern, when they vacated the railways back in around 2006, basically they're going through the process of abandoning the railroad. When PennDOT came to them and said, we're looking at realigning this so that we got good signals because we're going into the closed loop system, Norfolk Southern agreed and PennDOT made the changes there. Somewhat similarly at Pot House and Charlestown Road here, we have an intersection, mostly when you're coming into the borough off from Charlestown Road, there is a fifth light that is sort of, to use Mr. Prednick's favorite term of mine, cattywampus to the intersection, and it creates bad turning opportunities and really creates an elongated process of getting through there. PennDOT is probably pushing to get this done, but it's Norfolk Southern that has to actually make the application to the PUC to allow the vacating of the railway in the intersection so that PennDOT can come in and turn it into a 90, 90, 90, 90. That's too many 90s.
Follow up, if I may. I understand your point about whether we should consider opposing. I guess I'm also wondering if we should consider taking action to have Norfolk convey the easement within the borough to the borough.
It's certainly something that we could, the answer is no unless you ask the question, of course. I have, I think you're aware, I do have several letters into Norfolk Southern asking their concurrence to let us raise the trestle on Main Street up as it was when the bridge was being redone. I haven't gotten any response back since the last letter in which they asked for the jacking information from what PennDOT used. I've since provided that information back in December. Norfolk Southern is glacial in its decision-making process, but I will reach out to them again. I haven't asked that question, but I can.
Just considering it is maybe something we would want to incorporate into our trail system.
Would you want me to add this to the infrastructure committee for discussion, and then
Infrastructure or as it relates to parks and trails, sure. Okay.
Okay, so infrastructure.
Sounds good.
Anything else for Mr. Crack? Seeing nothing, as I was saying, code directors, public works, fire chiefs, finance directors report are in our packets. Any questions on those? Seeing none, fire department liaison.
We will have something next month.
Okay. I believe we need executive session for personnel litigation and real estate matters.
Make the motion to enter executive session.
For real estate only.
Oh, for real estate only.
I'll make the motion to enter executive session for real estate.
Do we need to come back?
I would reserve the option to come back.
Okay, so we need,
Second the motion?
thank you. I'll, for the record, make a note that Borough Council is coming back from executive session at 10 after 10. Real estate was discussed in executive session. I don't believe there's any action that's going to be taken at this time, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved. Thank you. Do I have a second? All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. Have a good night.